Hello and welcome, I'm Tim and this is TimBatSea. And I figured I'd devote a short little video here to show you a little bit talk about weather in the Caribbean, or so far what we've experienced down here. There's a phenomenon that happens being in the trade winds, and that's that whether there's wind or not, you get offshore, you're probably going to find some Caribbean swell. Even if the wind's not blowing for a long time, we always seem to find about 4 to 6 feet, even without any wind. And then when the wind blows, which it normally does down in the trade winds, seeing anywhere from, say, 6 to 8 feet is relatively common. And man, the other night we were banging into it around 8 to 10 feet anyway, the occasional 12. But there's something that we need to talk about, and that's the period. And we'll get back to that in a second, but I just wanted to kind of let the camera run here a little bit and show you. This is me coming down for dinner. Some of the guys have eaten already, and this is not a rough day at all. This is kind of a normal day, and you can see me kind of stumbling around almost as if I've had too many drinks or something like that, where the boat isn't really being really violent, but it moves quite a bit. And keep in mind that I think the boat displaces something like 348 tons, and that's without any fuel in it. Then we put another or at least another 100 ton of fuel on board too. So the sea is really powerful, and so going into it, things move. I read somewhere where they were talking about the effects of sea on people, on sailors or seamen, and it was saying how a lot of times we think we get thrown around, and it's really not the lifting up or throwing out of your seat that gets you, but what they call the rapid deceleration, or decelerating, or I don't know, something like that. But I guess it's where your body has a problem from when you're going quick and then it stops. It's not the acceleration of being thrust into the air, it's the other way coming down. Which, if you're somebody who's prone to seasickness or anything like that, this is all semantics. It doesn't really matter. You feel terrible, and people who get seasick, I think a lot of them would choose death over being seasick because it's so horrible to be that way. But for those of us that luckily get used to it, or find our sea legs, or just aren't affected, it's not so bad. Now over here, my AB has eaten, so he's just watching something on TV, having a little conversation with him here. Here's my engineer, and you can see we all kind of take wide stance and kind of wobble around a little bit, just so that as the boat goes one way or the other, we can take up the difference. And remember, this is a relatively calm day. This is what's normal. This is a good day. When it's really bad, it's not worth us videotaping, because we're just kind of hanging on. So this is it. But maybe this is a good time for me to stop and to talk about period. I get a lot of comments where people say, hey, what's the worst weather you ever been out in, or what are the limits that you go in, or when do you start to turn around, or all these different things. And everybody, I love the comments, and I love that people are interested in this thing. Unfortunately, I also know that people are really looking for a black and white, hard and fast rule. At this number you do this, and at that number you do that. And unfortunately, that's just not the way the way our world works. And I don't mean our world like everyone in the world. I mean our world as far as mariners work. We have so many different things that happen, whether the barge is light, whether it's loaded, whether we're loaded with fuel or we're light on fuel. When we're light on fuel, our boat handles very, very differently. It also matters whether you have an upper wheelhouse. We have an upper wheelhouse, which is really good for when we're, made up alongside a barge. We can see over the barge. Tugboats without upper wheelhouses have to go blind at that point. The downside of that is that it moves your center of gravity much higher. So all that weight, 76 feet in the air, really starts to make the boat move a lot more than it would if it wasn't there. So these are all different things that change. But one thing I think that, whether it be in the sailing world or in the tugboat world, that people don't talk enough about, and I don't mean that the professionals don't talk about it, I think that the observers, maybe a lot of people in this channel that comment don't understand that the period of the waves are much more, that's much more relevant than the height of the wave. So let me just give you an example. If you can imagine in your mind, I was going to draw this out on paper, but I think some of you guys that have been with the channel a while saw when I used to draw things out, and I'm so I'm so challenged artistically that I don't know if my scribble scratches made it worth watching or not. So let me try to do this audibly. If you can imagine in your mind a sine wave going up and down and up and down, and if you put a line, a vertical line at each one of the peaks, between the peaks and the valleys, you would have the period. And in this case, it seems as though a 9 to 12 second period is very common for this area, or it has been since I've been down here anyway. And 9 to 12 seconds is what the waves rolling over an observation buoy would see. So in other words, at the height of the wave, at the top of the sine wave, you would start the clock, and when it got down to the bottom, it would be 9 to 12 seconds. Now, the problem is that on a tugboat, we're not a stationary buoy or a stationary spot in the ocean. So if we are, everything matters whether we're moving into the waves or moving away from the waves. So if we start driving into the waves, even though the period will still stay at 9 to 12 seconds, let's just call it 10 seconds just for round numbers. Even if the period stays at 10 seconds, if we speed up or we start driving into the waves, effectively we will see that the period is going to be reduced to like 5 seconds or even 4 seconds. Even though the wave period hasn't changed, we're just driving into it, speeds that up. And so it's kind of like if you were in your car and you weren't moving and you stuck your hand out the window and there was no wind, you would feel no resistance against your hand. But if you were going down the highway and you stuck your hand out, you'd feel all that wind. That wind isn't there, that's you moving. And that's the same thing that happens with the waves. Now you might say, well, this is really elementary, you guys all know this. The thing that I think some people forget is that when we say fair winds and following seas, when the seas are behind you, you're doing the exact opposite. You're stretching that timeline. So your 10-second period might turn into 20 seconds now. So instead of going bang, 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 or bang, and then 5 seconds later, bang, like that, it might be bang, and then 20 seconds later, there is no bang, you just lift up on the wave, and then you slowly go down on the wave 20 seconds later. And that all has to do with period. So the period is really, really what defines how much of a beating you're going to take. So in other words, if you had, there are a lot of people that tow on the West Coast. I've never done this, but I've worked with many people that have, and they talk about the Pacific swell, where they'll say they'll be out in 20-foot seas. And the idea of being in 20-foot seas for me is something that it doesn't sound fun to me at all. However, if you have a 30 or 40 second period and a 20-foot sea, you might not really notice it standing on there. You're just slowly going up over 30 to 40 seconds and slowly going down over 30 to 40 seconds. And I'm not saying everything on the West Coast is like that. I'm just saying that people I've worked with that have had trips, that used to be on runs going to Hawaii, used to talk about these big seas but very long periods. So that was just something that I wanted to talk about so that you guys would understand what it's like. And I apologize that you're having to sit here watching me eat my supper while everyone else is watching something on TV. But the camera, you can see, is I tried to put it on so that the camera would pick up, the movement by it's trying to find the accelerometers of the camera are trying to find the level. So when it looks like the boat's moving back and forth, it's trying to it's the image stabilization trying to do that. That's what I'm trying to say. But anyway, let me show you some shots outside. So as I was saying, this isn't a spectacularly different day. This is the only thing that would make this day less than normal. As you can see, there are no white caps. So this is a relatively calm day for us. And you might be saying, geez, Tim, I don't see a lot of movement there. It looks pretty stable to me. Well, keep in mind that see where right at the bow there, that little loop is called, we call that the bull nose. From the top of the bow to the water is about 10 feet. I think it's nine change, almost 10 feet tall. So when water comes over there, it's coming over something that's 10 feet tall. You don't see the boat moving that much, but every time it crashes into a wave, like right there, the boat slows down. And it doesn't slow down like a lot, but it slows down enough that it makes your body, like if you're standing somewhere, it makes you want to knock you over almost. That it makes you wiggle a little bit when you're walking and that sort of stuff. So it makes things interesting. Obviously, if this was a really rough day, I wouldn't venture outside to put the camera out here. But hey, you know what I just thought of? I didn't say this earlier. I don't know why. I just forgot. But in the opening scene, I don't know. It'd be fun to see how many of you guys are watching and paying attention here. Maybe you can write in the comments. How many of you noticed in the opening, the first bit of video at the beginning of of this whole thing there? It's a shot just like this, but you can see a dolphin playing right ahead of us. Right on the bow wave there. So if you saw the dolphin, write in the video and let me know that you did. But anyway, this is us cruising through. So when we were talking before about the period, you can see where the period is relatively short, not because of the waves, but because we're driving quickly into them. Now, if I were the amazing videographer guy that I wish that I was, I probably would have thought when I filmed all this to take some pictures of us when we're going with the seas. And you can see, the only problem is when you do that, it's a different day, the wind's blowing a different way and that sort of thing. But in a perfect scenario, I would turn the boat around 180 degrees and you'd realize how much slower and waves aren't breaking over the bow at that point at all. Like there's a good one there, but that wouldn't happen when we're going the other way because the period had been elongated so much that we just basically ride up and then ride down. So to sum up the weather down here in the tropics for us at any rate, it seems as though it's since we go east to load at St. Croix and we go west to drop off our fuel in Puerto Rico. When we have the light barge behind us and we're crashing into the seas, we usually get beat up pretty well, and when we have the loaded barge and we come back, it's usually a pretty nice ride coming back. But, that's how that works. There is one thing that I've been reluctant to talk about, not because there's anything wrong, but just it opens up a whole can of worms. It's very common for people to say fair wind and following seas. And I've just got done telling you guys how when you're running with the seas, it increases the length of the period and your ride is much better. Having said that, I can tell you that towing wise, we don't especially like a following sea. When you have a loaded barge and the seas are behind you, even when the period has been elongated, you run the risk of doing what we call surging. And that's where, if you can think once more of the sine waves, so if you think that the tugboat is on top of the sine wave, and then the sine wave cycles a number of times, and then it gets back to the barge, and the barge is on top of the sine wave. And the two of you, if you're in step, the two of you will fall down the other side of the sine wave and then get down into the valley and then come up through the middle again and then be up on the peak again. And if you both are equal on that, except spread out by a number of cycles in between there, you would be in step, and there's nothing wrong with that. Where it becomes an issue is if you're out of step and the speed that the boat and the barge are going is different than the speed of the waves. So then what would happen at that point is what you don't want to have happen is that, say, the barge would be just on its way up the sine wave and the tug would be on its way down. So the barge would be decelerating and the tug would be accelerating, because the tug would be coming down the wave and the barge would be going up the wave. So what happens is, because of the difference in speed between the barge and the tug, a lot of force is put on the wire, and then the wire has to go and take up the difference. And when that happens, that's where we call that surging, and that's where you can tear stuff up, you can break some equipment, or definitely put unwanted wear on things. So in those scenarios, when that happens, there's two things that you can do. You can put out more wire to an extent, or slow down, or change course. But all those things will have an effect. And when I say to an effect, my old Portuguese captain that taught me everything that I know, he used to talk about saying, look, if you have 3 layers out and you start surging on the wire, you put out another layer. And if you're still surging on the wire, you put out another layer. He goes, after 5 layers, it doesn't really matter. You got to start slowing down. And I've wrestled with that for probably, 15 years, trying to figure out the physics behind why he said that. And who knows, he could be wrong, although that might be the only time that he ever was. But it would seem to me that the more wire you put out, the more weight you would have to add to your catenary, and that should be able to take up the difference. In other words, the wire will start moving up and down the water column, but having it move up and down, it will never come tight and you won't have to surge at that point. But he seemed to think that after 5 layers it didn't really matter. So I don't know if that's the case or not. All I know is that when you're running with big seas behind you and you're out of step with the barge and you got 5 layers out, I just pull them back a little bit and try to get my speed right so that we get in step with the barge again. Anyway, that's about it. That's my little take on weather here. Like I say, I've done other weather videos before, and I've told people that I know as much as you guys want to see horrific, horrible things out there, big seas and all this sort of thing. For one, I don't want to be out in that stuff, so hopefully I never get a chance to film any of that. And for two, I don't know that I would be a responsible content creator if I was putting that out, because I probably wouldn't have a job afterwards. After all, we pride ourselves in being safe and not going out in bad conditions. So that's probably why you're not going to see me putting out horrific content. But I know it would get great views, but then I would be without a job. So that's why that happens. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you liked this video. Maybe you could give me a thumbs up. That really helps out the algorithm so other people can have a chance to have this pop up as a recommendation. I thank you to all the people that subscribed, and a super thanks to all the people that are on the Patreon crew. If you guys are interested in helping out the channel is funded by people that, just like you, that might want to give $2 to $3, $4, $5 a month to help in the production of these. I got a lot of data expenses and equipment expenses, and those are all covered by the patrons. So I'll put a link in the description below to if you'd like to go to the Patreon page and become a patron, or Patreon, I should say. And you can go to Patreon and search for TimBatSea. And the good thing is that you also get by being a patron on this channel, you also get the benefits that also carry over to my other channel, SV Paquita. I'll put a link in the description below for that as well too. So if you haven't seen SV Paquita, go ahead and check that out too. Both those are there. Anyway, that's it for now. You guys, thank you so much. Be safe, and as always, I'll see you guys on the one.